so welcome back, everybody. I want to welcome our newest guest to the PACtrospective for the Why for our season 2 years ago, which was "'Tis Pity She's a Whore," and our director for that is Jessica Bedford. Jessica Bedford is an actor, a director, a playwright, and a teacher here in Philadelphia and in the area. And I want to welcome you to the PACtrospective. Hi, Jess Bedford.
Hi, Damon. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So you're in a section that we're calling the why. So why "'Tis Pity"? Open-ended question. There you go.
Why? Why? "'Tis Pity." Did you hear the whole title? It's "'Tis Pity She's a Whore." Why? Um, I think one of the things that I love about working on classical pieces is the way that uh, they demand that we look at society again. And yeah, sure, it's through an older lens, but one of my favorite teachers in graduate school used to say that in comedy, society reasserts its status quo, and in tragedy, history turns a corner. And so, with a piece like John Ford's "'Tis Pity She's a Whore," I think Ford was asking his society to turn a corner. And we know that that's sort of like, beautiful, but does it always happen? So by taking an older piece, a classical piece, doing it again, we're sort of saying to our contemporary society, look at the corner that the writer was asking his society to turn. Have we turned it? Are we better now? Right? It's a way of taking stock. So what particularly fascinated me about "'Tis Pity" is the treatment of women in it and how brutally, brutally honest it is. Yeah, yep. None of those ladies meets a good end. And it struck me as shockingly contemporary because I think Ford was saying, have we turned the corner on our treatment of women? Are we doing better? And, we had just had prior to that, some things go down in this nation of ours in terms of treatment of women and things like that. So it felt relevant to do it again, to say, let's look at how women are handled in a society that is dictated by men. Are we doing better than we were before? Maybe not. Maybe we should talk about that. And so then I think a piece like "'Tis Pity" is a great sort of door opening to conversations and things like that.
So, continuing that conversation, the thing that people, that might have like a cursory knowledge of "'Tis Pity" know about it is that, oh, that's the one, that's the incest one.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So with an incestuous relationship at the heart of the play, so how did you deal with this taboo and sensitive topic?
Yeah, yeah, it is the incest one. But in line with many like Jacobean tragedies. So that is a sort of thing with that form, is the desire to sort of scandalize and tackle the taboo. And so we had these two tremendous actors, Steph Hodge and Trevor Fail, playing our brother and sister, aka our young lovers. And it was tricky to sort of help those actors navigate a way in, because part of the thing that's crucial about the story is that we have to end up rooting for this couple. And that's kind of tough to do when they're siblings. This relationship really shouldn't be happening. But for the story to hold, the stakes of that relationship have to hold. Um, and so what becomes critically important is remembering their youth, and also remembering that this is a young woman actually with kind of like limited options in terms of like following her heart. So really just sort of investing in the characters, and then also trying really hard not to judge them, to let allow the audience to have their thoughts and feelings and judgments, but for we the artists just to present the story, which means presenting it with as real stakes as possible, as genuine love as possible, as genuine passion as possible. So we just decided to become like team Annabella and Giovanni, not judge them, put their story forward, and let the audience have the experience that the audience needed to have in reaction to that. So it was like a very conscious mantra of in the rehearsal hall of like, we're not judging them, we're just gonna, this is what happens, this is what goes down, this is what's in the story. So yeah, holding our private feelings private, and in terms of our relationship with each other, keeping that just very positive, positive, positive.
Which is something that you really kind of get as well, because you're not only a director, but you're also a great actor. So the idea that we
Right.
shouldn't judge our characters. It's up to the audience to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
well, because the moment that you do that, as any acting teacher will tell you, you're putting a wall up between you and the character. So you can't really live in their skin because you're really standing to the side of them and judging them the whole time. So, yeah.
so we had, like, with Pac, we had some like longtime people, a few that I talked to that didn't come to the play because of that. Do you think the play condones incest?
No, no. I mean, just the end that they meet. I don't know why I'm worried about giving spoilers away for something that we did a year ago, but I
I'm
suddenly,
gonna show pictures. They're gonna see it all. It ends bad. There's blood everywhere.
yeah, yeah, it ends really, really bad for
Yeah.
them. And I think actually part of the point that Ford is making, and I am one woman, and this is my interpretation. I'm sure there's scholars who are going to disagree with me because all the scholars are watching this interview, Damon. All of them.
Harold Bloom's back.
I think part of the point that Ford was making is that, like, look, if we continue to keep women so under thumb, if we continue to say to them, no, the world is not safe, you cannot go out in the world in this deeply patriarchal structure that we see within the play, then icky things are going to happen. Like a young woman who's basically kept on constant lockdown is going to maybe possibly fall in love with her brother because that's the only male she's been exposed to. It does seem to be commenting on that to me, that the incest is also a consequence of this attempt to control women and control women's bodies. It's a bit more of a layered one. It's not quite so on the surface as like what happens with Putana or Hippolyta, things like that, but it's there in my opinion. Yeah.
There is, in addition to, like, all that fun stuff, um, there is like a tremendous religious element to the show as well. The play
Yeah.
begins in a confessional. So how did you handle this religious through line that happened throughout the play?
Oh, yeah. How did I handle it? What did I do? No, I was kidding. Um, it struck me as a critique of power structures, the play itself. And so, a patriarchal society is a power structure. In terms of this society itself, the dealing with the church is another power structure, and one that within this society, we're in Parma, in Italy. Within the society, that the church is a governing and a ruling force. So if he's going to critique, the father, the head of the household, he's also going to critique the father, the head of the church. That is to say, Ford is going to critique. So it was just an interesting sort of parallel. The larger criticism of the church and the way power is handled there sort of bleeds down into the criticism of the way that power is handled within an individual family. So I sort of used it almost as like this, honestly, almost as a framing device, because the play starts with a confession and ends with these words from the cardinal. So it's just sort of a useful, like, overarching frame to sort of touch base with, to use as a reference point, things like that.
And even, and we're going to show some pictures, but even like the setting of it had sort of a sacred, sacrificial kind
Yeah.
of feel to it. It was set in the round with candles at
Yeah.
all four corners. The limited physical elements that we had were almost religious-like, in the sense that they seemed like altar pieces in a way. Uh,
Yeah. That
and I
was
know, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was inspired by, I was in, this, Damon, but just for, if we're sharing the fun backstory, inspired by, I was in Paris on a trip, and I was in Sacre-Cœur, and it was just after Christmas time. And so it was dark and gloomy outside, and the church was all aflame with candles. And I was like, it felt very like sacred. And also I was like, and if I'm being honest, a little sexy, like the candles everywhere. And the way that the play consistently flips between the balance of the carnal and the cerebral, particularly. I'm even thinking of some of the inspiration was pulled from, if you look at some of these paintings of saints from the era, you know, they're those beautiful oil paintings, we can all picture them, you know, so-and-so fighting lions or things like that. They're almost always in the nude. And so it's like, there's just this constant kind of chafe, this juxtaposition of the cerebral and the holy and the above, and then also just the body and the beauty of the body and things like that. So that's part of where that design came from. But I interrupted you. You were saying something smarter than I just said. What was it? No
Impossible.
pressure. No
Absolutely
pressure.
impossible. No. Um, so jumping from the sacred to the violent,
Yeah.
because there's a tremendous amount of violence in this play. So we will be talking to Eli Lynn, who did all the fight direction for the show, and they did a fantastic job. And we're going to talk to them about this show, and also about, they did the Sea Voyage as well, and just how those two fights are just incredibly different. But do you want to talk about?
Art gets ripped out in the Sea Voyage?
No, we cut that part. Yeah,
Okay.
we cut it. Yeah. So yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about? We'll talk with Eli about the physical portion of how we created the violence. But do you want to talk at all about your input into what the violence was supposed to represent, or how you wanted it to be?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, religion is violent, isn't it? Like the Bible's a pretty violent book. Um, yeah, and well, for one thing, it's a Jacobean tragedy. I'm not honoring the form. I'm not honoring the genre if I don't go there with the violence. I mean, that is part of the things that those writers put in their script, and I do believe in honoring what the writer has put on the page, perhaps because I am also a playwright, and so I'm a little precious about sort of things like that. But I do think how violent the play gets also has a sort of a more thematic resonance, which is that a story like this can only end badly. And I think that's Ford sort of saying to his society, if we keep on this track, this can only end violently. That is the only option that we have. It can only end badly. And for a play that goes to the heights of passion and love that this play goes to, that sort of feels like it has to be met with this sort of bloody and violent answer. I'm thinking of, there's this term, oh my gosh, I hope that my old teachers don't see this video because it's a word that I should know. Nerd fact, sparagmos, which is this sort of Greek tearing asunder, that the only way for a society to become kind of pure again is to tear itself apart limb by limb, which is certainly what happens by the end of the play, is that there are very few characters left standing, so that there's been this sort of, in a way, purification by blood. Now, I don't really know that I agree with any of that personally, but in terms of like honoring the play, honoring what is written, honoring the genre, it was like, we gotta go there, you know? So there's a lot of time spent on the, like, no, it's gotta look like real disgusting blood. And that's a great fake heart we found. How do we make it look like he just ripped it from her body? Because that's the story, and that's where the story needs to go. So it felt important to honor that, even though actually I'm a bit of a squeamish person.
One last thing. Was there anything as you're working on the show that surprised you? That I mean, you absolutely, you went to Villanova, so like there's all that dramaturgy you do at Villanova, and so you knew that play inside and out before we got into rehearsal. But was there something that surprised you as working on the play?
Something that surprised me.
Or even something that, like, maybe an interpretation of an actor you didn't see that way, but open your eyes in a different way to how it was interpreted.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, two things that surprised me. One, I was sort of Josh Turturro, our brilliant sound designer who also played our clown, wonderful actor, musician. uh, he, he and I really struggled to come up with like what this world sounds like.
Mm,
Perhaps because it is so like carnal and in the belly and things like that. And that was an sort of an unexpected challenge. I can't say enough about like where we landed. I think Josh is brilliant, and we got to a place that is um, was just fantastic. I was so thrilled with it. The sound of that drum, oh my gosh. But like the fact that that proved a little challenging was like, oh, this is surprising. But then of course, yeah, I get it. I get it. It's like all of these deep belly kind of themes. How do we bring them up to the surface? Because that's what the music of the play is meant to speak to. You know, it was easy to come up with sounds that sort of centered more on the cerebral or the obvious themes, things like that. But that's not the undercurrent of the play. That's not the slithering belly of the play.
mm.
So finding sounds that spoke to that without being a distraction. Because all of our music was performed live, which was awesome. That was kind of that was a harder process and was a harder challenge. And we were actually in rehearsals and still creating sound. And you know, it was one of those things where it's like, that was happening a bit late for the way I normally like to do things. But I think because it was being born right alongside the rehearsal process, it led to something super cool. And then the other thing I would say is that working with the brilliant Ebony Pullum on the character of Putana, and the way that she sort of struggled with Putana was surprising to me, and just such a wonderful education to me, because you know, I sort of see Putana as this like mother figure who means well but is misguided. And you know, the way that she took that 50 layers deeper, and the way that she was constantly pressing me with, if I love this girl, because Putana is the sort of governess nursemaid character. She is to Annabella's characters as the nurse is to Juliet,
Mhm.
Putana is to Annabella. Um, and just the way that she was constantly seeking to make everything a bit more complex, a bit more nuanced, a bit more grounded, and honestly, like always constantly seeking a deeper root into love, rather than just saying Putana's many funny lines, which Ebony also did very well, was really awesome. Really helped me grow as a director, I think. I hope. I hope, Ebony. I feel I've learned from you.
Well, that's great. So, Jess Bedford, I want to thank you for spending some time and chatting with us about this little thing that we call "Tis Pity, She's a Whore," and with the Perspective.
Yeah, I'm so proud of this piece. It was a brutal one. It was a hard one, but man, I think it showed in the results. And so I'm always grateful to PAC for having had the experience, because it lives very close to my heart, which is still in my body. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, Jess is part of the Fantastic Four that's going to be writing PAC's adaptation of Jane Eyre, which we'll be doing at Drexel in the spring. But you know, we're all in this quarantine right now. So what are you doing right now to just to keep yourself busy, to keep yourself fulfilled?
Oh, well, I just finished up teaching. I was able to keep my teaching, keep my acting classes, move those online, which is a very interesting thing to teach for acting for the theater while using a camera. But that's okay. We grow from our challenges. And now I'm just getting ready to start up. Actually, I start a playwriting residency next week, which I'm going to be doing remotely. So my days are not empty.
Well, Jess Bedford, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to see you, Damon.